Hello, everybody. Welcome to our program tonight. My name is Cullen Strawn. I'm the Executive Director for the Arts at Old Dominion University and also the Director of the Barron and Ellen Gordon Art Galleries here, where we're excited to present a show that is pandemic delayed, but we finally get to share it with you. It's been a long time in the making. Sterling Goulart, Assistant Director of Operations, worked very hard on it. And we're all here together. It's good to be together in the same room and not looking at a screen, although all you folks out there, if you're nearby, come on, Barron and Ellen Gordon Art Galleries, Monarch Way. So I'm not going to say much. I'm going to turn it over to the artists so they can speak to you for a few minutes about the show and about their work. And please help me welcome Courtney, Kessel, and Danielle Wyckoff.
I don't know, because we're getting so close. We have two?
Oh. Okay.
Wow.
Can you hear us okay with our masks on?
Yeah, y'all can come closer. I mean, we can,
If you want.
I don't want to be like,
There's also some seats
I
over
promise
there.
not to spit. I do want to really thank Sterling and his wife Chrissy for helping us massively install the show. Chrissy helped curate some of the panoramas, which was really helpful whenever we were trying to negotiate how to hang Care Winner and Bread Giver. So kudos to Chrissy, even though she's not here. Thanks, Chrissy. And Sterling, oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for making this show look so great. And many thanks to you all, the ODU community, for coming out and for the people who we've had the opportunity to meet today.
And thanks to Cullen for all the tech. Wherever there's their tech guy.
Yeah.
It was pretty fun to learn that this was the first show in which the fun goodies could be actually utilized, which are the speakers, and then this awesome screen, which is also a backlit screen too. So thank you, Cullen. And thanks to the committees, the exhibition committee and the visiting artist committee for having us.
Yes, thank you. Shall we start with the... Okay. Wait, this? Don't you move?
One more. I think that was a really long time.
That was the long one.
It was only a minute, but it's really hard to watch. You're like, what's happening? Okay.
So when you see two women together, what do you think?
Competition?
Mm-hmm. Do you assume they're talking about babies?
Possibly.
Men?
Probably.
Do you fear they are up to no good?
Definitely. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe they're just having fun.
So, have any of you heard of the Bechdel test? So show like hands,
Couple hands.
hands.
Yeah.
It's sort of a three-tiered or three rules in regards to if a film makes the cut for the Bechdel test. And we want to read the comic.
Right. So, well, I don't know. I have this rule, see?
I only go to a movie if it satisfies three basic requirements. One, it has to have at least two women in it.
Who, two, talk to each other about.
Three, something besides a man.
Pretty strict.
No kidding. Last movie I was able to see was Alien. So Alien does satisfy the Bechdel test, but I don't know. Ridley Scott, I don't know if there's been any since then.
So much of our work deals with this idea of social justice, placing the female presence in the art gallery. Barbara Kruger talking about your body is a battleground. Oh, I skipped all those notes. Sorry about that.
I don't know what they were. You can go back.
Okay. So in many ways, our work is informed by social justice. We look at how women have been portrayed throughout history, and we make work that spins those limiting tropes and that embraces others.
So the personal is political still is relevant to the work, both as female artists and as mothers. By bringing even that space of the private into the space of the public gallery already in effect is a political move.
And this idea of the personal is political is sort of a tenet of second wave feminism. And it is absolutely evident in both of our individual works as well as our collaborative work. So in order to get there, we are going to talk a little bit about second wave feminism.
Quick art history lesson. For those of you that don't know, the Guerrilla Girls, a couple of slides on their work, sort of having the conversation of inequity in the art world. This particular piece is talking about that, women get paid 1/3 of what men do. But what's also interesting is that 75% of MFA students in art schools are female, but only 70% of gallery representation, or 70% of gallery representation is male. So there's a discrepancy there in between what happens from grad school to the real world in representation. So another piece by the Guerrilla Girls, when racism and sexism are no longer fashionable, what will your art collection be worth?
And as they point out in this image, the cost of one Jasper Johns, for the cost of one Jasper Johns, you could own a piece by all of those women artists and women, or artists of color.
So Carolee Schneeman and Anna Mendiata, these aren't works that necessarily pertain to our artwork, but in order to get to where we are, it's important to have the conversation about second wave feminism and how much the women from second wave were talking about the body. They were at the place where they could choose between career and family, and in choosing career, they chose to talk about their body and the female experience specifically, and also not through the lens of painting or sculpture traditionally associated with male work. So film and performance art became a big part of second wave feminist work. Am I still going?
Yeah.
Martha, okay.
Yeah.
Martha Rosler, Semiotics of the Kitchen, another really great classic where she kind of goes through A through Z with the, I am going to take this off. Is anybody okay? Are you okay with me taking this off? Too much carbon dioxide into my... So A through Z, going through the tools in the kitchen and using them, but very aggressively. And if you notice on the back shelf, it says other, and it's cut off right where the M is. So very much specific to having that conversation about mother. Mary Kelly, Postpartum Document, where she is approaching, so second wave feminism, and then you get into women who are actually putting the subject matter of the maternal in the space of the gallery. but through this other lens. So they're not really saying, oh, hey, I'm a mom, I'm like, this is what my work is about, even though there were dirty nappies in the gallery, as what was the headline from the newspaper article from that time. But she was approaching it through the lens of psychoanalysis. So it was almost like guised in this sort of like scientific kind of like taking the intake of the baby and the output of the baby into the gallery in a very scientific kind of way. Meryl Latimer Kelly's using the mode of maintenance as in labor, taking, again, what was happening on the inside of the domestic space of the home and then putting it into the space of the gallery in this very political way of like making it visible. So a lot of the work that, I guess a lot of this work is really talking about the visibility of these things. So like putting it out there, getting witnessing.
The visibility of care, what it takes to maintain something or someone.
And I loved this to see, you know, not just the actual manifesto typed out, but then her handwriting on there with care in all caps from 1969.
Courtney's getting her PhD right now, so she's...
But not on this stuff. So finally, I'm going to talk about Judy Chicago, if it's a little bit easier to talk with.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read some of the notes because there's some really great quotes in here. And again, her work was in an effort to put that female experience in that public space. Woman House with Miriam Shapiro, 1972. In her interview with Gloria Steinem, Chicago spoke of her, quote, goal as an artist, stating that it has been to create images in which the female experience is the path to the universal, as opposed to learning everything through the male gaze. If I go forward now, this is another quote, if I go forward now, it's because of a network of support that has been built that will allow me to go forward. My destiny as an artist is totally tied up with my destiny as a member of the female sex. And as we as women move forward, I move forward. That's something that is very hard to accept. Because I could not do it. One of the few notes that I have in here is this quote. It's long, but I mean, just long in there. It's very hard to accept that because it's like I could not do it all the way either, but I've come a long way. I know I've come a long way, and that means that other women can come that far and further. She was not personally interested in motherhood, but she admired women who chose this path. She didn't find it right for herself, and as recently as 2012, she said, quote, there is no way on this earth I could have had children in the career that I've had. So, I mean, I say all those things because both acknowledging the fact that I could not have the conversation about the maternal and the subject of maternal in the space of the gallery without these women. So, kudos to them. This is Meryl Latimer Kelly's piece, and I often quote it. I'm an artist, I am a woman, I am a wife, I am a mother in random order. I had that on my Instagram for a while too.
Do you want to, since these are going to be your slides? Yeah,
sure. So I'm gonna start with this piece as sort of the gateway to the rest. I'm really okay. So this piece is called Imbalance With, and it's on the TV screen there. We did a quick compilation just for 5 years of the work. But as recent as this year, my daughter and I performed it, and she will be 17 in a couple weeks. So this began when I came to art school as a 35-year-old single mom going through a divorce with a 4-year-old. And so it was sort of like, how do I acknowledge that space? How do I have that conversation? And I'm sure you've seen the videos, so you can understand that, you know, you start off with this empty seesaw and adding things on there. And on the video, there is the very first piece. You'll see how little she is. She's like a little tiny kid on the seesaw. And it was the first time that we performed it. And we had practiced it, putting the stuff on there, practiced like how long it would take, bungee cording, making sure everything's safe and secure and not going to like topple over onto this little child. But I didn't know how it was going to end. So, we got to this sort of like balancing point, and I was like, okay, how are you? Do you want to come down? Are you okay? And she's like playing, at the end of the seesaw, and she's like, no, I'm fine. I'm cool. I'm like, oh, I guess it'll be over when she's ready for it to be over. And it became a massive like realization that was very much representative of motherhood, that like I couldn't do my work as an artist unless she was sort of content and being cared for. So the second one is a few years later, and she actually was Minecrafting on an iPad, and we lasted a really long time. We never did that again. Yeah. So these are just iterations. And then here's this year. And if you want, you can scan the QR code with your phone, and that will take you to the YouTube link where you could watch the actual live streamed. And I can also pull it up later if you want that. Are you pulling it up? No. Okay. Okay. So this is where I'm having this sort of conversation about stuff. And I feel like the seesaw was that like beginning part where the stuff became representative of the presence of a child in my life. And people who don't have children don't have all this shit. So, and it's a constantly evolving quantity and type of stuff that is ever rotating. You're phasing out old clothes, old toys, things that they're no longer interested in, and then surplusing new stuff. So I did a number of these. These are called mother load. They're floor to ceiling sculptures of like there's no secure anything on there. It's all just balanced. And there was always moving parts. There was always like that laser printer. The like disco light and Christmas lights and fans whirling, just sort of like live elements. I sort of explored the notion of the similar idea, but with this weaving. And this is, I probably should have shown like a side view, but it's literally like 6 inches wide, or, it's really narrow. And oftentimes it's in freestanding, so you can walk all the way around it. This was in front of a gallery window, so you could see it from the outside. But sort of this just overwhelming structure of stuff. Playing around with what those next steps would look like, I started to abandon the series of stuff. That was probably like 10 years of like playing around with kind of objects in that way. But I am really attached to objects and how objects have like an essence. It's sort of like that object-oriented ontology of like where, when they are put near one another, they have a conversation. There's sort of like sentences start to be formed, or a story starts to be told. So this piece in my studio without any artificial light, and then whenever I turn on the studio lights, it's sort of, I call this a drawing. So the light actually sort of activates the space and engages it in a completely different way. And that's just a bunch of crap from our house and like laying around or whatever. And then of course the books. So the books will be an ongoing conversation in my work that literally form both the foundation of literal sculptures, like they're actually in the sculpture, holding up a leg of a chair or a leg of a table or God knows what. Or if they're in the sculpture itself and not part of the structure, then it's almost like a beeline to my brain. So you can see the research. So that's foundational structurally, but also foundational to my thinking at that moment in time. So continuing with the stuff, these two are going to be really awful but pictures. It doesn't really get, so my work never photographs well.
There's too much stuff.
There's too much stuff. Yeah. So Vermont Studio Centers, I was grateful to be a part of that residency program. And at the last open studios, I decided to take everything in my studio, including the furniture that was provided, including everything that I brought, which was a tent for some reason, but I had the tent up in my studio, and create this sort of like weird like installation. I used everything. So this video I made while I was there, and it was projected through the stuff. Literally everything was all piled in there. I think it looks better at night too, obviously, but I had music playing. Of course, the disco ball is in there, reflective material. But that was like a cushioned little area that people could come in and hang out. And there's a box of wine too. This is really like Blair Witch, sorry. It was really fun in person. It's not really hard to pull that out from here. There's lots of wine. So last fall, I was in a feminist film class, which was scholarly, not necessarily creative. And I'm not a filmmaker by any stretch of the imagination, but I wanted to try my hand at playing with the medium. So this is a set that I created, and I hired a filmmaker because, like I said, that's not my thing. And taking the stuff and sort of scattering it around, I wanted this space to feel like kind of like a gothic teenager's bedroom or something. And of course, I cast my daughter as, well, what she normally does. Sorry, Chloe. Just kidding. No, I said, just act like, you're a teenager looking at your phone. So again, these are just stills, and I haven't debuted it yet, or else I would share it. It's a 3-minute video, and there are the books that also have that. Other examples of books throughout very many versions of sculptures. And so when I was talking about the idea of things as, or objects as language or storytelling devices, I was interested in the possibility of taking those big, large-scale structures and seeing how delicate could they be, like how finite or precious, could they get, with still having some of that element of, I think I said it earlier, and I said it well, and I'm not going to remember exactly how I said it, but like where each of these pieces are words that create a story, that so each one has like different sort of vibe to it, and they're mobiles. They're like that big. And then this is one of the larger ones, and this was in the set for. It was called Once Upon a Dream. So at some point that'll debut, and it'll be online or something. I'll enter it into the Athens Film Fest.
Today, while we were running through our slides, I noticed that these knives seem very similar to the Martha Rosler still from Semiotics of the Kitchen, and there was a nice little nod to that feminist history.
And those are steel. They were meant to look like cartoon knives, but they're very, very real. And I dropped one in the studio on the hardwood floor, and the tip down, and it stuck and I was like, oh, careful. So as I'm, no longer the mother to this small child, I'm sort of playing around with a different kind of identity. And I'd say that it's a largely collaborative identity, but playful. And so playing around with these other modes of portraying friendship, womanhood, but also this weird, uncanny kind of situations. But it's similar to the concept of using objects and from the areas. So in these pieces, I'm engaging with the spaces and the objects within the space, and then creating these sort of sets with them. And this series was called Pretty Ugly, and we were sort of playing around, like dress up. So that was fun. It's still, these are works in progress. I mean, I know Danielle has some of like things that we're, still working on. Still have lots of potential. I'm not sure where they're going yet. This is another collaboration that is brand new. Some video works that we've been playing with. It's really performative elements and more books. That was also in an installation that we just made. So, and we're going to get to our collaborative work after Danielle shares some of her work.
So much of my research involves considering that small sliver of the world that I experience, such as human relationships that both elevate us and pull us under, or the line created where the land and water appear to meet, that seems so clear and observable, but that is truly only an illusion. Through reading poetry, drama, and fiction, I learn a lot about the world around me outside of my experience. I learn that humans can be quite cruel to one another, that history often repeats itself in both trauma and in joy, and that the power to narrate one's experience, to write, to speak, to form a story, to tell one's history is powerful and is an act of affirmation. In 2008, I began collecting stories about love. I would invite people to talk to me. They would come into my studio, and I would make tea for them. And if they consented, I would record our conversation and then later write them out on long strips of paper. And in this installation, Always Only Ever, the written out stories create an immersive experience, a space in which viewers could meander among the words, reading stories until the paper scrolls either dipped too low for them to read or raised too high. The intent of this work was in part to show the collectiveness of loving, that our stories may involve different names, locations, but that the experience, the action of loving is shared. In works of literature that I read, the stories I listen to, and my own experience, I know that love is sometimes to offer all of yourself. Our efforts, whether out of earnestness or desperation, feel like they are momentous. Yet we are only so big. In this drawing on the wall, I write the phrase, "I love you," repeatedly. And then I stand in front of it, in front of the drawing, rubbing my hands along the words to create the circle. And an attempt to express this idea of loving being so consuming, yet recognizing we are so limited. After giving birth, my sense of loving shifted. People had told me that to love a child is unlike any other love, and I now know exactly how true that is. In this piece, as my child was 3 months old, and I was rawly aware of how vulnerable she was and still is, I returned to the idea of that other drawing, "All I can give you is all that I am," and performing the drawing to gallery visitors. So when Josephine was calm, I was able to write up the wall. But when she needed care, I held the pencil out and recorded the movements as I tried to soothe her. And here's an image of the piece installed with the documentation of the performance. So as I think about loving, I also think about how we know the world around us. Teaching foundational drawing for many years has drilled into my head this idea of the eye level or the horizon line and that vanishing point. In order to depict realistic perspective, you must know these things, you must identify them. And the moment that you move from that space where you're observing, your perspective shifts. So, too, in our lives, we each perceive the world according to our metaphorical eye levels, our vanishing points. In this installation, I am thinking about perception, how we perceive things, and specifically the act of loving. And I set the space for people to move around. And much like Courtney and our shared upbringing in grad school at Ohio University, much of this work involves a respect for the materials. I use cheesecloth, salt, water for their physical properties as well as their symbolic ones. Cheesecloth is used to sift, to clean, to wrap. It's reminiscent of gauze for wounds or diaphanous fabrics for romantic settings or wedding dresses. Salt preserves, it cleanses, it allows us to float in bodies of water, but it also corrodes. And water, life, the element that changes from solid to liquid to steam, yet still remains the same property. I compare this to love. It evaporates, it pools, it runs the courses of least resistance, it shapes the land, and it threatens to drown us. So, as story collecting has been a part of my practice for 8 years before I began this process, I realized when I was collecting stories that what I felt like was the real, the most important part of that practice was the instance in which a stranger or somebody else, somebody I did know, would sit down and talk to me. Like that felt like the real art. And so with Courtney by my side in 2016, we traveled to Alberta, Canada. And I was telling Courtney, like, I just really want to do this. I really want to do this. And she said, well, just do it already. And helped me find a scrap of wood. And we set up and she began.
This one on the top left,
Yeah,
which
I don't know which
the
is the
piece of wood on the wall there.
I don't know.
So
Which is the, anyway.
It's good to see the progression of the signs too.
Right. And so with Please Tell Me a Story About Love, it is exactly like it looks like. I set up in a public space. I have a sign that says, please tell me a story about love. And I wait for people to talk to me. And I'm very happy to be doing this piece again here at Old Dominion. And I invite you later to sit down with me and tell me a story about love. This practice of storytelling, of listening to stories to then create art, has manifested in other ways in my practice. In 2018, I went to the Lawrence Arts Center in Lawrence, Kansas, and I was able to collaborate with the performing arts there. So the director of performing arts helped set up a story circle for women veterans to talk about their experiences. And from those stories, I created a site-responsive installation in which their words were printed on the fabric and strung about the space. And then designed the set to go along with the theatrical script that the director of performing arts and other actors wrote. And you can see here on this side, I don't know which is the pointer, up. That's what I shouldn't have done. Leave it to me. Oh, yeah. Courtney fixed it. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I'm not going to try to press the laser pointer. You can see on this side that these are the movable scrims that had stories written on them or printed on them, and then some of the people who are a part of the production. So as I have a young child, I am trying to negotiate what it means to be an artist and a mother. And as Courtney mentioned, with her work, she couldn't have made the work that she made without the feminist artists from the 70s. I couldn't make the art that I am now making without Courtney. Courtney taught me how you can be a mother and an artist at the same time. So in this series, this is called the First Word series, I allow my child to draw on the same paper as I documented her first words. And you can see a little bit of the process here. And as I'm still trying to understand how to express this love, the depths of this love, but then also the endurance of it. I mean, it really is an endurance test. I'm trying out different methods. And so here you see a series of videos that I've been making with my child. This started in January of this year, so it's also kind of a document of pandemic life. But this is, I'm calling it carrying for right now, and it is about the idea to care and to carry somebody. Other work that I do is advocacy work that I consider a performative piece with another collaborator, and we're called Reproductive Media. So we are actually attempting to change policy within academic and arts institutions. And if you want to learn more, come talk to me later and I can tell you about this. But that's Reproductive Media. We have a mobile zine library in which we use as an advocacy tool, talking about reproduction, sex, gender, and family. And then I thought I would just show you some shots of my studio space, the works that are in progress. Apparently I really like shiny things also. Okay, so let's return to this idea of women together. Both Courtney and I are very interested in, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're interested in this idea of the history of women and how they've been perceived through the ages.
I get the same thing happen. Okay, so Witches, Midwives, and Nurses is really interesting because it sort of outlines where women were primarily in the medical industry and medical world, but they were around the 16th century, part of the persecution, cast aside, no longer allowed to be, and then there was like this reinstitution of like education, and it was only men that were allowed, and hence then slowly midwives were allowed back into the medical industry and nurses.
Right.
Good. Do you have something more to say?
I don't remember. We practiced this, and now I'm not remembering.
And Sylvia Federici has another book that's The Witch and the Caliban, and in that specifically, Caliban and the Witch? Caliban and the Witch. Specifically, she talks about this idea of when land started to become no longer communal property in which it was sectioned off and people had to work for other people, everybody kind of started to falter. So there was no more communal working on the property, no more, so wages were sort of taken away, or like the produce was taken away and wages were earned, but the wages were never enough to then buy the things that they needed, as opposed to when things were more communal. So hence this beginning of kind of capitalism and...
Yeah. So neither of us are historians, but we do find a lot of interest in these philosophies that are in that book, and the traces of history that link women as European women, specifically in these books, as healers. I'm sorry, what were you?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you.
And so this is something that we share an interest in, but then we also share interests in plants and what we can learn from them.
Yeah, we have a constant sort of back and forth of who's gathering what and where and what it can do, and and so like I brought elderflower salve and plantain salve for Danielle, and we're constantly sort of foraging and learning more about different herbs and flowers and things.
So part of our collaborative practice is very much our friendship, and our friendship is very much based on this idea of shared knowledge, and thus the talking to each other about, oh, hey, what's in bloom up there? This is in bloom right now down here. And like, oh, I'll keep eye out. In 2 weeks, I bet I'll see those violets too. Mm-hmm. Or, hey, I just made some, elderflower tincture. Would you like some? So there's a lot of sharing. But we also like jewelry and rocks.
And shiny stuff. So as we talk about two women or women getting together, any collaboration is built on trust and having a willing and capable partner to do weird stuff with.
For instance, sitting really close to one another, attempting to sense each other's proximities without actually touching.
This piece is called Touching, Not Touching.
And it's one of the earliest collaborations that we've done. This was done in 2012. We
have a lot more gray hair now.
Yeah, a lot more gray hair. But it's a practice that we've continued. And we often, when we are together, we do little sketches, such as this one. I don't know if you wanted to add it. No? Okay. And this is a series of videos in which we have dipped string in ink, and then as we're untangling it, we're talking to each other, and it's videoed from above. So even though we have the documentation of the process on the paper, what really is the work, I think, is the talking. Yeah.
And these pieces haven't been shown. They're just sort of sketches, stepping stones.
Right.
Maybe at some point there would be like a thread of semblance. So this is the first panorama that we ever did, and it's this one right over here. And we were in upstate New York at Storm King Sculpture Park, and we did this panorama, and we were like, wait, that's not what we wanted. And so then we turned facing this way and did the panorama, and then our gaze, can you go to the next slide?
Yes.
Our gaze was then sort of stitched to kind of the landscape, and then to one another, even though technically we weren't looking at one another during that time, or like at the time of the picture.
And so we have a few other images that aren't shown. Oh, wait, they are. Just teasing. So when Courtney and I get to make work together, that is when we travel with one another. It's very rare that we get to be in each other's presences, and if we are at each other's homes, we are like undoubtedly going to be taken. Other people will want our attention. So when we do get to make work together, we go on what we call transitencies. Instead of a residency, we are in transit, and in that travel, we find that space to make work. And so a lot of these are in this piece, or this exhibition.
So I think one thing that is interesting, there was a class here earlier this afternoon, and it was interesting. It was fun to kind of like make this connection of horizontality within the work that is in this space. So obviously the horizon, the panoramas are already a very horizontal orientation. But then these new drawings, which we just made a couple months ago, are total collaborations where one person starts the writing and then another person reads it and kind of responds with the same writing implements. We're passing the colored pencil or the marker to the next person, in almost like back in grade school where you'd be passing notes to one another. So we weren't really talking, but then sometimes we did. Depends on how much wine we had.
True. And in this picture, you see my child, Josephine, you see my cat, Stanley, and Courtney setting up our camera to document the process. But in this setup, much like what we have here, even though we're not actually looking at each other, we appear to be looking at each other. And much of our work, it is that facing one another. Mm-hmm. So even though you don't see us in those finished drawings, we are across from one another as well.
Yeah, I guess I didn't finish that thought with the horizontality, with being across from one another with those drawings, and then the horizontal sort of nature of the smaller photos underneath, and then of course the care winner bread giver. Yeah, so some more documentation, and then this is some also from that same time a couple months ago. We were playing around with these, of course, books, but these structures of little like vignettes and kind of performative moments. And so we did a few different, these are videos, but this is just a still because it's not finished yet. But these little like videos of instances. So perhaps at some point it'll look like some kind of odd migration through backyards of suburban Michigan.
And this work we're also doing with another friend of ours, Natalie Wetzel, who in that picture you can see she was very pregnant. 4 days later, she had her baby.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that we were thinking about in these pieces are that stages of motherhood.
Yeah. So I have my ceramic cast, and then Natalie had casted her belly and Danielle's belly in different times.
Right. And then Josephine holding the lamb.
Her baby.
And then another image of this series that we're working through.
And we also, the setup, we go back real quick.
Oh, yeah.
That we made this whole backyard knowing that our transitency was going to happen at her house. We weren't going to have a lot of time in the studio. So we did this whole backyard setup where the backyard became the studio. And so we were really engaging with that on multiple different levels throughout the week that I was there.
My neighbors were very curious.
Yeah. But they're also artists, so.
Yeah. And then finally, just some other sketches of things that we're working on, very pandemic related. Obviously, the Zoom format is something we're familiar with at this point.
Exquisite corpse.
Right.
Of Zoom.
And another. And so we want to thank you for taking the time to sit with us today to hear about our work and our influences.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Is there one more? Oh, yeah.
You can visit my really outdated website. No, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, y'all.
Anybody questions? You're welcome.
We lost count of how long that was.
Yeah.
I would say it's a pretty fluid back and forth, though if I'm being very honest, this summer, Courtney came up to visit, and she was the one who had a lot of the beginning ideas. And as soon as she started talking about these ideas, it was just like a back and forth. And like, oh, well, what if we do this? Well, what if we do this? How about this? So, yeah.
And then after the work... Yeah.
You're finding out things about yourself because you can collaborate as friends, but with the greater popular stuff.
Yeah.
So you find things out about that.
I'm finding I'm collaborating with more people.
Yeah. I think both of us have really enjoyed the collaborative process. And I know for me, I'm at a point in my life where I have a demanding job. I have a 3-year-old child. Yeah. And really the only way that I am able to be accountable for my studio practice is if I have another human that I'm responsible to. And so collaboration is really the way that I keep making right now.
I also think that collaboration is hugely feminist because it's also flattening the hierarchy of ownership of who made what and where and
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I know sometimes like I'll be like, well, I don't want to do that, but then you just got to let it go. And I also confessed to Courtney today that I'm jealous of her other collaborators because I
was jealous of her collaboration with Kayla a couple years ago.
I really love the work that she and Aaron is doing, and I just want to be a part of it too.
Supreme. Mm-hmm.
So seems like maybe like you also have some of that with yours, like you're writing. I really like that.
I know.
You're hanging, you got all the stories and you're hanging everything down. I thought that was very cool.
Thank you.
So what are the different strengths and how do you do all this?
Yeah, different strengths.
I mean, like I have undergrad and grad degrees in sculpture.
Yeah.
And the expanded practices, which then ends up being the video work and
Right.
like the modes and media of documenting performative stuff. So then therefore video and techie, but then structural or material.
Yeah. That's when I'm like, yeah, she saves the day. Yeah, I would say that Courtney has she has so many skills, so many strengths. But one of the things that I've come to her constantly about is fabrication of physical objects. My training was in primarily two-dimensional work. My undergrad was in printmaking and drawing, and then my grad degree was in printmaking. But I went to a university that was very open and accepting. And so from there, I started learning performative practices from Courtney, really, and from some of my other peers.
Yeah.
So,
but I would say that Danielle's strengths lie in her sensibility with materials and, like especially 2D work as well. That, I mean, there's no way that I also don't work in those materials, and she does so much so that it makes it so easy for that to come out in the collaborative stuff.
I think that's very cool because then you have that create stuff that someone that's good in one or the other can't.
Yeah. And we learn. Yep.
Involve your ideas and create these pieces that bring so many elements.
It goes back to that idea too of sharing knowledge. A lot of our practice is about sharing what we know and what we can do.
Anyone else? I know you all already asked questions. I thought you'd like the women's veteran piece. Did you know that was in there? Or? Yeah. Cool. Well, Danielle's going to perform. Maybe we'll get a swig of wine first and then something to eat. But what time is the performance?
It's after.
Like now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll get you wine and food.
Thanks. Thank you
so much.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.